Hey everyone, my name is Bayra, I'm from Mongolia. Welcome to another reaction video. Today I will be reacting to the Russian Cossack people, not to be confused with the Kazakhs from the Kazakhstan. So the Cossacks are historically originated in the plains of Eastern Europe at the north of Black Sea. So they are known for their self-governing and semi-military lifestyle. Ever since I read the book called The Quiet Flows the Dawn, I've been always fascinated by this Kazakh people's culture, tradition, and history. So this book is written by Mikhail Sholokhov, a very famous Russian writer, and he actually won a Nobel Prize for this four-part novel. So this is actually the second part of the novel. There's another book that's with the same size, so it's a very long and detailed book about Don Cossacks, Don River Cossacks during the Russian Civil War and Russian Revolution and World War I. So after reading this book, I watched the movie adaptation of this book. Actually, it's a television series with a lot of episodes, and I think there's 2 or 3 versions of this movie adaptation. So yeah, my idea of Cossacks is based on these novels and book adaptations, and the video I'm about to react to is made by the Great War channel. I greatly recommend to anyone who is interested in World War I. This channel has a very great contents. So they made a special episode about Cossack people's history. So let's do it.
They were the closest European counterparts to the heroes and villains of the American Wild West. Rugged, even cowboy-like individuals fighting again and again for their freedom. You may picture them with boots and saddles and huge mustaches and hats, armed with sabers and rifles and sweeping across the steppe. I'm talking, of course, about the Cossacks. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War special episode about the Cossacks. We've talked a lot about Tsar Nicholas, the last ruler of the Romanov dynasty. And now I'm going to talk about the first. Michael Romanov. He had support from the Cossacks that, after years of chaos, put him on the throne at Moscow. Later, he sent a representative south to Cossack lands to demand submission, and that representative was put into a sack and thrown into the River Don. And that was that. Back then, no matter how much Moscow tried to turn them from allies into subjects, the Cossacks refused, which caused a fair amount of trouble. But Moscow allowed them to keep any territory they conquered, like Siberia, as long as it was officially part of Russia. But who were these people, and where did they come from? Until the 1500s, there wasn't really any such thing as a Cossack. For a few hundred years, the Mongols under Genghis Khan and his successors had ruled the enormous open plains that stretched all the way from Hungary to China. But the Mongol expansion eventually stopped, and the empire of the Khan was divided up. The part that is now southern Russia was under control of a people called the Tatars. They were very warlike, and they lived by plunder, often raiding to the north as far as Moscow. They were pretty nasty even for the times, carrying off thousands of people to sell at the Ottoman slave markets.
So the Cossacks didn't exist until the 1500s, and they were originated in the plains, southern Russia. So if I'm not mistaken, it was ruled by Golden Horde, and the Golden Horde was founded by Batu Khan, the grandson of Genghis. So I guess there's a connection between a Great Mongol Empire and the Cossacks. So it's interesting to hear that these people were called Tartars or Tatars. In the secret history of Mongols, Tatars were actually the main enemy of Genghis Khan's tribe, Khamag Mongol, and actually Genghis Khan's father Yusuge was poisoned and murdered by this Tartar tribe. So Tatar tribe was very powerful, one of the biggest confederations of Mongols at that time, and they lived in the eastern side of Mongol, now the Inner Mongolia. And so after Genghis Khan was gained power, he defeated the Tartars. So it was very hard for him to defeat Tartars because they were so powerful. So he actually asked Jin dynasty or Altın Ordas to help defeat them, which shows how powerful the Tartar was. To avenge his father's death, Genghis Khan actually massacred the Tartar people. So anyone who is above the height of ox cart was killed. So only the children survived. And also, one thing interesting is that Genghis Khan's wives, Yustu and Yusuge, were from this tribe, Tartar. So of course, the Tartars mentioned in this video is not related to Tatars and the Mongol tribe. So according to what I read from the history books, the Europeans were called this enormous plains, enormous area of Asia called Tatars, and I think maybe the word Tartars were originated from this. That's my guess. And now in Russia there's people called Tartars. There's a Tatarstan, this republic. So, but I don't think they are related to Mongols. But so from what I read, the Eastern Europeans and the Slavic people called it all the Asian people and nomadic people, Turkic Mongolian people called Tartars. So it's kind of an umbrella term for this semi-nomadic Turkic Mongolian people. So I guess the Tartars mentioned in this video has the same roots as this nomadic Turkic Mongolian people.
The Russians saw them as a true terror and their lands as simply barbaric domains. But by the 1500s, the Tsars were gaining in power, and while doing so, were reducing the peasant population to the level of serfs, which is pretty close to being slavery. You can imagine that the peasants weren't so happy about this development, but what could they do? Well, they could submit, they could die, or they could run. And the only place to run was to the Tartar lands to the south. So again, as you can imagine, the only ones that made it there were the bravest, the strongest, or the most self-reliant of the Russian peasants. Now beyond Moscow's reach, they assimilated with the Tartars and eventually dominated them in some ways. So you had something totally new. A huge community of Orthodox Christian warrior horsemen of both Slavic and East Asian descent. These were the Cossacks, and they truly lived by the sword and were ruled by no man. They were unlike any other people in Europe, not exactly Russian, but not an entirely distinct tribe. Certainly not a military caste like the Junkers of Germany. For centuries, their homelands were a kind of melting pot open to anyone brave or desperate enough to enter. There is no better analogy than the gun-toting freebooters of the American West. The name, well, as far as I'm aware, nobody knows exactly where the name Cossacks came from, but they were a remarkable people. Unlike pretty much anyone else in the area, they were totally democratic. Everyone had a vote, including the women, and they elected an ataman who served as leader for 1 year, so that no one person could ever get too powerful.
So when I think of Kazakh people, this image is actually what comes to mind. This people with huge mustaches, with the papakh hat, and with the broad shoulders, and with all these swords and guns and the weapons. They're like warrior people, and it reminds me of our ancestors because of their free-spirited, self-reliant, and also this warrior tradition. So the Kazakh leaders were called ataman. Actually, in Mongolia right now, people use this word ataman with a different context because I don't know when this word came to our language, because I think maybe during the Soviet times. And so in Mongolia, the word ataman is used as someone who is like boss, not boss as a boss of company or organization, but as more like a top dog, the more related to someone who is bully, someone who is like a stronger, rules by the fist, So the ataman is very like incorporated into our culture, and now everybody uses it. For example, if someone uses, I'm the ataman of this neighborhood, or I'm the ataman of this town, this means like I'm the top dog of this town, I'm the boss of this town who rules by the fist.
And anyone in the world who wanted to be a Cossack could be a Cossack. You just had to at least say that you accepted the Orthodox Church. Whatever race or ethnic group you were, didn't matter. There was no hereditary elite, and all property was communal. And Moscow certainly enjoyed having them as a buffer between enemies further south or east, and they certainly helped Michael Romanov. But times change, and Russia did want them as subjects. The 17th and 18th centuries saw Russian wars against the Cossacks and Cossack rebellions against the Russians. These ended in Cossack defeat, and they became part of the Russian Empire. And many of their traditions were diluted. The ataman was now appointed by the Tsar. That was a big one. Some large and strong Cossack families took huge estates and began to live as traditional Russian aristocracy, and serfdom was introduced to Cossack lands. But some traditions won't die, and for the Cossacks, it was the warrior tradition. But keeping that came at a price. Cossacks owed the Tsar first 20 and then 30 years of military service, and they had to provide their own equipment and horses, which is a lot to ask from an ordinary family. And a big downside for pretty much everyone, the Cossacks' traditional contempt for outsiders eventually made them into the Tsar's instruments of repression and genocide.
So this book, The Quiet Flows, The Dawn, is actually about the Cossacks' life and struggles during the Russian Civil War, and a lot of things mentioned in this video is very detailedly explained in this book, and how they were served the Tsar Nicholas and how they used as a tool to defeat the rebellions and all these people. And so this the idea of the mindset of that Kazakh people who has a contempt for the hatred for outsiders is very detailed in this novel. And also, for example, in this novel, the main hero, the Grigory Melekhov, is actually of Turkish descent, and because of that he was like an outsider for his family, and he was like discriminated. And also this military service, how they served the imperial army, the Tsar Nicholas, was very detailed, and they had to provide their own horses, their own instruments, and also their everyday life, the way they like agricultural activities, and also how they do during their lives, and Orthodox Christian tradition, something like that. Everything is in this book, so it's actually a very accurate description of the Kazakh life.
In 1648 and 1649, they massacred 300,000 Jews. For doing all of this, for their years of service, they got grants of land. I guess I just made them sound like murder robots, and that wasn't really the case, especially a couple hundred years down the line. In the abortive 1905 Russian Revolution, their service to the Tsar nearly broke down when there were Cossack mutinies against being used to crush the peasant workers' rebellion. The disloyal units were disbanded, and a crisis was averted. But when this war came, they were ready for service. All of them, boys, middle-aged men, you name it. They made up more than half of the Russian cavalry and had a fearsome reputation. Though since the Russian high command sent them and their horses against German and Austrian machine guns, the war was worse for them than for most Russians. They died in droves. By 1917, when they were called upon once again to put down popular uprisings, many of them had had enough. They stood aside and allowed the revolution to proceed. Of all the signs that Nicholas II and his whole system were finished, this was the clearest.
So this is partly true, but also there were Cossacks who supported the provincial government of Kerensky and wanted to restore the old order and wanted to actually Tsar Nicholas to give back the power. And also there's a lot of infighting between the Cossacks. Some were supporting the communists, some were supporting the White army, and so as the civil war progresses, the more and more Cossacks joined the Red Army. And also there's the Cossacks had their own intention of declaring independence from the Russians, but because of the communists and all these internal conflicts, they couldn't do it. And eventually the Cossacks who joined the White Army were defeated, and most of them were killed, and then maybe others joined the Communist Red Army. And this is what actually happened to the main hero of this novel, Grigory Melekhov. He, after fighting against the communists, and he then joined the Communist Red Army, and then it's a very long and chaotic period. In just maybe 5-6 years, their whole life just turned upside down, and everything they knew was destroyed. And it's actually a very tragic story of Kazakh people. And
Though no one had been surprised that when Petrograd turned to chaos and the revolution began, it was Cossack horsemen who were called in to stop it and restore order. Russians had learned to expect to see Cossacks wherever there was trouble. In fact, often it was the Cossacks who were the trouble. They put the first Romanov on the throne, overran Siberia, and broke the back of Napoleon's forces. They were often the Tsar's enforcers, eventually becoming very much the scourge of the peasants and the Jews. They broke what the Romanovs needed breaking, and yet the great Tolstoy, who had lived among the Cossacks when he was young, said that what actually made a Cossack was their love of freedom. And yet, ironically, they were the real symbol of the Tsar's oppression, the Cossacks.
Okay, so they were symbols of Tsar's oppression. That's a very powerful description. I think it's very accurate. And so in this video it is said that whenever there's a rebellion, there's a need of order, the Cossacks were called. So I guess now, even now, some things are still like the same. For example, so I remember in 2014 when the Sochi Olympics was about to start, the band called Pussy Riot, a Russian feminist and liberal punk woman group, was whipped by the Cossacks because they were demonstrating, like showing demonstration against Putin's regime, and they were like whipped by Cossack militia. Also during the Crimean crisis, you know, the Ukraine and Russian war, also the Cossacks were seen enforcing order during the demonstrations against Ukrainians, and also the demonstrations against Ukrainian government. So I guess even now the Cossacks are still enforcing law and acting as a tool to stop the rebellions and also to restore order and from the Russian government and Russian authority. So it was very informative and interesting video, and I also recommend this channel, The Great War. I want to learn more about Cossacks, and I want to read more about Cossack people, and so thank you for watching my video. If you know about Cossacks and interested in Cossack culture, please leave a comment, and if you're Cossack yourself, speaks English, please leave your comment and your impression about my video. And actually my next video, I want to make a reaction video to Baron Ungern von Sternberg. This channel has actually made a special episode about his life and his military campaigns during the Russian Civil War, and so maybe in my next video I will make a reaction video to Baron Ungern von Sternberg, because he played actually a very big role in the Mongolian history, and he's actually portrayed in a very negative light in Mongolian history because of the communist times, but actually there is a lot of other informations that are emerging, so I want to give the accurate portrayal of him in my next video. So see you soon. Please consider subscribing if you want to know more about Mongolia.